The main change is how people consume music. The simple reality is now that you can get access to as much music as you want online at either a very low price or, dare I say it, for free. A lot of people have chosen to put their money to work, so to speak, in other areas of the music sort of value chain. And in particular, we've seen massive growth in areas like live events. And that speaks to one of the big conclusions from this report, which is actually the music industry is in rude health. The industry is growing. Indeed, in 2017, we estimate that the total outlay on music is now beyond its previous peak, which is 2006. The interesting thing, though, is that only a very small proportion of this ends up in the hands of the artists. We estimate just 12% of industry revenues end up with the artists, and that's where we could see the impact of disruption.
That is a crazy number. Only 12% goes to the artists themselves. How much of the growth in revenue, and you say a big part of that is on back of artists doing more concerts now, more festivals, that type of thing. How much of that growth is contingent on the streaming services just not having or not being able to compete in that space?
Well, that's absolutely one of the key takeaways from the report, which is that longer term we think there's scope for more vertical integration within this space. I mean, one of the striking things about this industry is not only is it incredibly complex, but actually it just hasn't changed. You know, record labels are still record labels, distribution platforms are still distribution platforms, and concert promoters are still concert promoters. And ultimately, in order to make sure they still have some access to where the money's being spent, some of these companies are going to have to think about how they move into other parts of the value chain. So vertical integration, I think, is one of the big developments we're likely to see in this space.
I want to bring in Arjun, our technology reporter. You are a man that subscribes to everything I've ever heard of in every single form of media out there. When does a firm like Spotify, we talk about vertical integration, horizontal integration, when does it follow a Netflix model? When does it start investing in new musical talent in the way that Netflix is creating original content as a way of eating into the share of these record labels?
Yeah, that's a really great point, actually, Willem, because what we are seeing is actually some artists are looking to bypass the traditional routes to market now. So rather than go through some of these streaming platforms themselves, they're actually launching, record label albums, songs on their own websites, for example. And actually, that seems to me a great area for the likes of Spotify or Apple Music to tap into, because there's a clear demand from the artists to want to come to market in a different kind of way. I think these distribution platforms now, the likes of Spotify and Apple, could provide very good routes to that. If you look on their platforms as well, there's a lot of things in the way they're kind of advertising concerts for the artists. For example, like when is this artist going to appear next and why? And that seems to me, there seems to be a big push of them trying to tap into a few of those things around what Tom was saying around live concerts and things like that. And actually, I just wanted to jump in and get a question to you, Tom, is when do we start to see some of these newer internet streaming platforms begin to actually eat away at some of the other parts of the chain in the music industry? When do they start to perhaps host their own concerts? Cut out the middleman, exactly.
It's direct to consumer. Well, the reality is we're already beginning to see this. One of the most important points from the report is the fastest growing part of the recorded music industry is the independent artist sector, and within that, self-publishing artists. We talk in the report about a famous rapper called Chance the Rapper, who's very famously self-published all of his content, and as a consequence has a much bigger take of the money of the revenue that he generates. When you dig below the surface, there are some really interesting things going on. We have a section in the report talking about direct-to-consumer in particular, and some really interesting platforms like Tune, which are using blockchain technology, not only to make sure artists get a fairer share of what they're generating, but also to do that in a much more transparent way. And I think that's one of the changes and one of the disruptions that will happen inevitably in that space.
Hey everybody, it's Hadley Gamble from our new CNBC Middle East Bureau in Abu Dhabi. Thanks for stopping by. Now, to watch more, you can try one of the videos that just popped up on your screen. And don't forget to subscribe.